was a long day for all of you. I won't take much time. Good evening to all of you. Good evening to the distinguished guests on the dais and all the guests hearing this presentation. I see a lot of known faces here. Mr. Ojha represents the early part of the pipeline introduction when pipeline came in. Mr. Raj Kishore, middle, and many young engineers are there. A few days back, I made a technical presentation in GTI Gale. And one thing which I said was, when I made my introductory remarks, HBJ pipeline, where I started my career with speaker bag, is now almost 40 years old. What changed over 40 years? Gale, from a pipeline company, became an energy-driven company. But what went wrong? The corrosion rates, instead of coming down, have gone up in India. So something went wrong over the last 20, 30 years in India. When Mr. Ojha was there, things were different. The new generation will see a completely different format of how pipes will corrode in future. So this is a brief snapshot. I won't take much of your time. But this is more focused on CGD because this conference is regarding CGD. A CGD pipeline network is completely different from how we operate cathodic protection vis-a-vis cross-country. So if you see the CGD network which is there on the screen, it is like a tree network. You have a 12-inch pipe, and then you have 8-inch, 6-inch, 4-inch, connecting to many customers, connecting to CNG stations, whereas a cross-country pipeline is relatively simple. It starts from point A, finishes at point B. They'll have pigging stations about 130 or 140 kilometers, and SV stations will be about 30, 35 kilometers. There may be one or two branch offs. The problem with CGD network again is we have SV, which is either directly buried or mostly in buried RCC pits every 3 kilometers. Now that changes the whole scenario of how we would operate and maintain our CP systems. What else is the problem with CGD networks today in India? Mr. Kapil showed photographs of a controlled ROU. We don't have a controlled ROU. 30% of our pipelines are under road. How are we going to manage this? What integrity are we going to put in to ensure that the lines are there? I have done many such presentations in many forums. No concrete answer has yet been given. How would you manage your CGD networks? So if you see the difference between cross-country pipeline and city gas pipelines, which I just said, a city gas pipeline has so many monolithic joints, and as all of you know who are experienced pipeliners, a monolithic isolation joint is required so that the CP current should not drain into the pipes which are mostly above ground but which are already earthed. The biggest problem again in city gas is where is the land to put an anode bed. We are being forced to put deep ground bed just 5, 10, 15 meters away from the pipeline, and the water tables in India have completely collapsed. So we are just putting in an anode bed just for the heck of putting it. The resistances after a few years are 10 ohm, 15 ohm, 20 ohm, which was unheard during the earlier days. Sectionalizing valves every 3 meters. Most of the sectionalizing valves are in RCC pits directly connected to the buried line. As long as the pit is dry, there is no current drain, but during monsoon seasons, these pits are full of water, which again pick up a lot of current. Foreign structures, CGD pipelines, again, unfortunately in India, we have no discipline. The pipelines are laid haphazardly. We have water lines laid. We have HT cables now being buried under the smart city concept. So it is a mess, honestly. Multiple pipeline diameters, many HDDs. Now this is another major issue, what is there today in the CGD section. Most of the pipelines, almost 30-35% have been laid by HDD or shallow HDD. Monitoring the HDD pipelines under roads is extremely difficult. Whereas in a cross-country line, things are disciplined. People are disciplined, contractors are disciplined. Fine, the cross-country line we run at 70-80 bar, but this also we run at 90-20 bar. It's a hydrocarbon what we are pumping in pipelines. If I show you a cross-section of a CGD network, we are now, but I do a lot of consultancies, we are now forcing the operators at least to show on the piping layout where the HDDs are. what is the depth of the IDD? Otherwise, if you don't have this knowledge, you don't know which the coatings or where the CP currents are going. Again, the biggest problem today we are facing with CGD networks, they are sharing corridors with high voltage transmission systems. You can see a lot of high voltage transmission systems running parallel to the pipeline. So any network from an integrity perspective is coatings cathodic protection. All of you know that. To operate cathodic protection, we have to ensure electrical isolation, and if we are doing any earthing, which we have to do, we need to completely electrically isolate from a DC perspective the earthing so that only AC bleeds into the soil. And the biggest problem today in most of the CGD networks is that we do not have any facilities for doing inline inspection. So we are basically being tasked to maintain pipelines for 35, 40 years based on sound coating and cathodic protection, and then try to do some ECD and ICDA surveys to find out if the pipe is healthy or not. So what changed over the last 20, 30 years? During your young time or my young age, most of the corrosion was soil based. Today, the corrosion rates have changed. We have a lot of stray current corrosion coming in from the DC side, not from conventional pipelines, not from the DC traction, but what we will now be seeing is the solar plants and the solar PV panels which we are putting in, anything about 1 or 2 megawatts. The DC side is causing a lot of milliampere currents to flow into the ground, which is the part you can't avoid that, and if our pipelines are very close to it, then there is an interaction between the leakage current which will be picked up by the pipeline, and whenever it gets discharged, we'll have rapid corrosion. AC side, all of you know, we are having a major issue today regarding AC interference in India. So the soil-based corrosion is getting superimposed with DC corrosion and AC corrosion. Maintaining AC corrosion in city gas networks is also very, very difficult, but we have to do it. We have already led the networks. There is no running around, or we can't run away from it. What we again need would be competent manpower to ensure that they understand the subject and then try to control corrosion on these CGD pipeline networks. So what this slide basically shows is that almost we would have already laid almost about 18,000 kilometers of CGD network. Some of the older networks of Gujarat Gas, IGL, MGL have been in the ground for the last, I would say 15, 17 to 20 years, but many new networks are coming in, and now is the time when cathodic protection, permanent cathodic protection systems are getting installed. What we lack today is skilled manpower, monitoring and maintenance. Also, we do not have the right people who can do monitor and maintenance based on the new standards which have been issued. So skill is a big factor which is a problem in CGD networks. We are all aware of it. Whether we address it or not, that's a secondary question. So if I look into every component of a city gas station, steel pipelines, SV in pits, distribution pressure regulation stations, PRS, metering stations, CNG stations, if these stations, all these stations are earthed, if the earthings are not proper, it would affect your CP station. Obviously, coatings, all of you understand, if coatings are damaged, CP gets compromised and the pipe corrodes. But all this sort of electrical isolation and earthing which we require on all the components, which is not there to that extent in cross country, makes O&M of a city gas network much more difficult. Another major problem there when we go into the industry is, oh, Mr. Singh, what are you talking about? I get all my potentials are okay. Fair enough, but these potentials are on potentials. We stopped talking about on potentials about 15 years back, but the industry never went back. There was a presentation slide of Mr. Kapil where he said that GAIL is doing instant off PSP every 6 months. Probably GAIL is the only organization which is doing every 6 months. PNGRB states 1 year, so everybody takes the plea that I will do my off potential every 1 year. The concept of on potential is no longer there in the world for the last 15 years. I don't know why. We have only carried on, okay, if I get my minus 1.2, minus 1.4 on potential, everything is okay. Things have to change. We have seen physical corrosion coming on the pipelines. I'll just show you a small video. The potential shown is minus 1.1 on potential. Off potential goes below minus 0.85. So the line is not protected. But everybody is saying, no, 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 my on potential is minus 1.2, minus 1.3. 60% of the CGD networks today have this problem in India. Sorry. Would you put me back? Oh, the presentation was there. 1 minute. मैं कर लूँ, आप कर रहे हैं? ये नीचे presentation है. ना ये नीचे कर दीजिए. ना presentation में आ जाइए ना. Just click the presentation. तो ये मतलब this is the problem what we see. Just close it. मैं करूँ क्या आप कर लेंगे? Okay, fine. So this is my request. Anybody from the CGD industry, I see a lot of young engineers sitting here. If they are from the CGD industry, if you really want to tell your management that my line is protected, instant off PSPs have to be done. It is not simple in CGD because in a CGD network, we have a couple of transformer rectifiers which are all electrically connected. So every single transformer rectifier has to be switched on and off in a synchronous manner using GPS interrupters. If you only switch off 1 or 2 rectifiers, and rectifiers 15-20 kilometers down the stream which are electrically connected will give you erroneous results. So a lot of work has to be done in terms of ensuring that we have proper instant off PSPs. Today we are forcing the industry to use data loggers. If you see this data logging, on the top is the on PSP, bottom is the off PSP. So most of the off PSPs are coming below minus 0.85. That's the way we are pushing the industry today. If you are data logging, we can pick up these signals using machine learning, artificial intelligence. We will be able to predict where the CGD pipelines would get compromised due to corrosion. But still, the industry has to go a long way to bring in these modern tools which have been there in the other parts of the world for the last 7-8 years now. The other part now comes is coatings. Once the pipe is installed, we have to ensure that the integrity of the coating is maintained. So we do all sort of surveys, CIPL, CAT, DCVG. But again, a lot of innovation is required. Why? Because the pipelines are under road. How are you going to pick up the signals? The conventional technologies of current attenuation, CIPL, direct current voltage gradient are only good up to 5 meters. 10 to 12% of our networks of CGD networks are built at a depth greater than 5 meters because we have done horizontal directional drilling. What happens to those areas? So if any asset owner critically examines his network, 40% of the network, I would say, you have no idea what's happening on that line because you cannot accurately measure these parameters. So the innovation would be required that these non-piggable lines going forward would have to be made piggable. Otherwise, 15-20 years from now, you will not be able to make an assessment what is the health of your pipeline. So basically, I'm just going to skip through these slides. What exactly we do with cathodic protection? We give electrical current, and over the 3 LPE coating, we generate a layer of OH negative ions. These hydroxyl ions prevent the damages on the pipeline to corrode. So that's all what we do when we apply cathodic protection, and when we do instant off PSP, we measure the intensity of these hydroxyl ions. So wherever I have a damage, steel is contact with soil, steel will corrode. What is the intensity of corrosion will depend upon the soil resistivity and what is the AC level on your pipe. And this is what we try to avoid, the small pitting on the pipes, because that's how the pipelines are going to fail, and they fail. They don't fail that the whole steel collapses. Small pits causes the gas to escape, and the moment the gas sees the heat source, the pipe has a chance to explode. So you can see thinning of pipelines. I can show you a number of photographs today in India. We don't want this. This is what we are here for. We have to run our CGD operations in a very safe way. If you don't do a proper O&M, these are sectionalizing valves, then the quality gets completely compromised. But this is what we see, a isolation joint directly buried into the soil. How are you going to do maintenance? These are pipelines laid under the road. On the left-hand side, we have a transmission tower, on the right-hand side, I have a transmission tower, 220 kV. The pipeline is under the road. And you can see the voltage, 21 volts was coming on that pipeline. We electrically earthed it. It's now been reduced to 5 volts. Again, earthing is a major O&M requirement in CGD pipelines. We have to earth pipelines at regular intervals. Now what we do is, the design says put zinc grounding electrodes. Fine, we'll put the zinc grounding electrode in soil. Then nobody does any maintenance. No watering, nothing. Then the resistance starts to go up and back the pipe is again compromised due to AC interference. So a lot of work has to be done. A lot of, I would say, the O&M engineers have to physically go to the sites and learn the whole things. The subcontractor people have to learn, otherwise there will be compromises in the city gas distribution networks. Just one or two more slides. So this just shows you the red arrows are CP currents entering. AC, most of the pipelines in city you will see 2 volt, 3 volt, 5 volt AC. Now the earlier thought processes were that 15 volts, my line is okay. That was from a perspective of shock. The latest standards say even 1 volt, 2 volt can cause AC current leaking into the soil, which can increase the rate of corrosion. So we have to measure the current density to find out whether the pipe is protected or not. Now, current density measurements require 24 hours of data logging. What we were doing earlier for pipelines, put a reference electrode, just measure the on-off PSP. That is not true if your pipe is under AC interference. Now you have to measure this black current which I have shown, the current which is leaking out for 24 hours using a data logger, and then make an assessment if the line is getting protected or not. So a lot of work has increased today, which Indian engineers are still not following, but that's the code, that's the standards which have come in. And in the latest OISD 226 standard, which was issued in June 24, they have put this, but the asset owners still have to follow that. Even the regulator, PNG auditors who are going in are still not following 226, which was issued in June 24. So we have to ensure that this earthing, which is maintained properly, if you don't maintain that, we see a lot of high induced voltages, 5 volt, 10 volt on most of the city gas networks. Another problem, earlier the requirement was that the pipeline has to be 4 meters away from the transmission tower. In June last year, or in 23, CEA issued a regulation. It has to be 25 meters now. So who's going to operate the lines now? Are you going to shut down the lines, or are you going to go back to the government and say, withdraw this notification? This is a gazetted notification. So that's a big question, sir. As we go forward, more such notifications are going to come from Central Electrical Authority, which will make working of CGD pipelines much more stringent, because we have laid the pipelines haphazardly, no respect. यहाँ डाल दो, NHA आया उसने सड़क ऊपर डाल दी pipe के, all compromises. So fine, the country will pay for that. These are some photographs of polarization cell or DC decouplers, whatever we do. Pipelines under the road, standing on the road, we are trying to find out whether the signals will come or not. This is HDD, another issue in city gas. A lot of damages occur when we do an HDD. So the question is that I'm not alarming you, I'm just showing you the photographs. These are realities. We can't run away from realities. We can mitigate this problem. We can today in a modern world, we can detect all holidays, but then we need good engineers at site. You just can't put a subcontractor and ask him to do the job and get a minus 0.85 reading and say, okay, my network is all okay. We are all accountable. We are today in a world where even one death due to hydrocarbon, the companies are accountable. So my request to all of you is, this is the last slide I'm just going to take over, is that we all have to ensure that we do a good job. We have done the laying now. And now the part is going to start O&M. The transmission towers are not going to run away. The pipelines are not going to run away. It is the human brain which has to work to ensure that we can ensure our CGD pipelines safely operate for the next 25, 30, 40 years. A lot of investment has gone into these pipelines, and probably CGD, these networks, will carry hydrogen probably 15, 20 years from now. With that, I'll close my presentation. Thank you very much.